we'll be talking about the differences of between, whatever, straight and gay dating. And then that's it. I'm Lucas. I'm a gay black man. I'm Tim. I'm a straight white man. We'll be talking about the differences between gay and straight dating.
Yeah, man. Okay. Do you want to kick it off then?
Cool. Okay. Hello, everybody. We're back for podcast number 2. Today we'll be discussing the differences between gay and straight dating. I'm a white straight man. My name's Tim.
And I'm a gay black dude. My name's Lucas. So to kick it off, I kind of want to talk about, I guess the difference between you and I is that I have dated a girl before, unless it's something that I don't know, Tim.
Yep. No, I haven't dated any men that I know about.
Have I ever told you about this actually?
I think you have briefly, but you're gonna have to remind me.
So the only girl I've ever dated, she was also Asian. So my boyfriend's Asian right now. I don't know. I've always found Asians exotic, I guess.
Mhm.
And there weren't many Asians in our school. So this was during tertiary education. So that's sixth form in the UK.
Mhm. Mhm.
I think that's the equivalent is like high school in the
Yep.
USA or something. But yeah, like we dated. This is actually an embarrassing story.
Dude, I
Because I
want to
was
hear
kind
it.
of thinking, have I ever been dumped? And I thought, no, I've not been dumped. Me, don't, no, not at all. And then I thought, oh shit, like I have. I got
Mhm.
dumped by her. So basically, I
Is
guess
that what turned you gay?
it's funny.
Is that why
I've
you rejected
I've
women?
used that joke, yeah, for a lot of women that I've met in my life.
Okay.
But yeah. So sixth form was a new institution at the time. I kind of liked the attention. I was
Mhm.
I was already pretty sure that I was gay at the time, but
Before you
um
started dating her?
yeah, I guess.
Okay.
So I think so. Yeah, I was just kind of enjoying life, enjoying attention.
And
Um,
what did you kind of start dating her because you were physically attracted to her, or did you start dating her because
Good question. Yeah, I mean, I
that
guess I
was
just
just the
find
thing to do?
she was pretty, she was exotic. I think
Mhm.
kind of like we call them the term is a beard, right? So you kind of
Mhm.
have a girlfriend to cover up any ambiguity about your sexuality or something, right? But I've
Interesting.
never been perceptibly gay in terms of the stereotypes that people have about gay people. So
Yeah.
I kind of got away with it. I enjoyed the
Mhm.
attention. There was nothing serious. So listen to this. So even though I dated her, I never felt any sexual attraction to her. So
Mhm.
during courtship, I think the reason she decided to just end it after like a month or so
Because you
was
weren't putting
because
out.
there was like there was no sex involved whatsoever. I remember
Mhm.
even being at her house once. Her parents
Mhm.
went in, and I just didn't make a move. I'm like, this is where it ends. This is it, bitch.
So could you not fake? You couldn't even fake it. Like you were just so not attracted to her sexually that you couldn't even
I was
try.
also extremely young and naive, and just
Mm.
it was a harrowing experience having sex with someone that I'm not even sexually attracted to. So
Have you had sex with a woman then?
I have actually, yeah,
Okay,
a couple of
interesting.
times, yeah.
So, so I guess this is saying that. So you've kind of seen both sides, right? You've dated obviously uh, guys and dated girls as well. So you kind of have a foot in both worlds. Obviously, in the last however many years it's been now, you've exclusively stuck to guys, which is what you're sexually attracted to. And my experience, I guess, is strictly dating girls, which I'm sexually attracted to. And so, yeah, it'd be good to get through some of those differences. And I know I have a lot of questions about the dating world for homosexuals. And, I'm sure you've seen, I mean, you have questions as well. So I kind of wanted to get straight into it.
Okay, yeah, yeah. Let's go, man.
Um, so first and foremost, we're going to kind of get controversial right off the bat, but
Oh, are we?
um, and this is probably going to be quite sexual, I think, but we'll get into it. I think so. Obviously, dating for boys and girls, there's this kind of dance that happens, and there's kind of stigmas attached to when things get sexual when you start dating someone. So, from a female's perspective, you don't want to have sex too early in the dating process to kind of maintain interest and to there's just kind of some courtship mannerisms around that, right? If you put out too early, it's kind of seen as a bad thing. Does that dynamic exist in the homosexual dating world where a guy might hold out a little bit before engaging in any intimate contact?
100%.
Really? Okay, I didn't actually know that. Because we'll probably rewind a little bit as well to put more context in this, because I, as a straight man, perceive the gay dating world as hypersexual. That courtship doesn't exist as much. You kind of go straight for it, and there's not kind of this dance before. But
And
anyways,
there
elaborate
are,
on that.
yeah, there are reasons that I've hypothesized, but I won't get into the details of that. I think that
So, in your experience, though, you've dated guys who didn't want to have sex or anything on the first date or second date or things like that. Is that a common thing, or is it more an exception?
ah so that's a good question. It is it's not as common as it is in the heterosexual world. I
Hmm.
concede, but it definitely does exist. I mean, in terms of natural selection, right?
Hmm.
Even homosexuals get to select. But what's interesting, which we kind of have to go into before we tackle any of these areas, is
Hmm.
the dynamic between a homosexual couple, right?
Hmm.
So what I wanted to do first is to kind of explain that,
Hmm.
to
Yeah,
allow
good,
people
good.
who might not have had the opportunity to understand. So with homosexuals, I think a lot of people just perceive two men who kind of like men, but
Hmm.
within the homosexual world, you can almost say there's also a binary concept, or that we label as top and bottom. So
Hmm.
a top would be the giver, and the bottom would be the receiver. So we could see
Hmm.
it as a kind of spectrum. So there's
Hmm.
people who identify as versatile top, so they're
Hmm.
more inclined to be a giver, and versatile bottom, meaning the more predisposed to be the receiver. But what you
Hmm.
also have to consider is that with every individual that you meet, there is a different dynamic, right? And it might be a slightly different dynamic, including the
Hmm.
heterosexual world. For example, you might date a girl who has or manifests a few masculine qualities, and you
Hmm.
might date another girl who manifests more feminine qualities, right? So every
Yeah.
dynamic is different. Everyone has a different personality and a different upbringing. If we kind of go into the nexus of that, um,
So, quick question, real quick. So,
yeah.
with the top and bottom situation, you think people are kind of innately either a top or a bottom? And follow up question is, do you think that is that kind of determined, like, because, or actually, I guess this is a general question, but is there masculine and feminine role within a gay dating relationship? And does it kind of follow along the lines between this top and bottom classification?
Yes, it does actually, um,
Okay.
but but it's not absolute, and it's definitely not always as ostensible as you might think. So sure, someone who manifests effeminate qualities, you could probably guess that they'd be more
A bottom.
likely, yeah, a bottom.
Hmm.
But you sometimes you never know, right? Like you can't.
Yeah. So,
Um,
also, out of my own curiosity as well, I've heard of
mm,
like the saying a bear or something like that. There's like a bear and something else. Is that the same as like a top and a bottom?
no, a bear is a kind of, it's kind of like a fetish. So someone who is attracted to
Oh,
people who,
big,
so a
big
bear is
hairy
big,
men.
hairy. So it could be a big,
Got it.
a
Okay.
masculine, muscly guy.
Hmm.
It could be a um someone who's overweight, right?
Got
So
it. Got
the
it. That
idea is
makes
that you're just
sense.
big and hairy, right? And masculine. So I
So,
think that you would qualify as a bear. And I've been told by my
ooh,
boyfriend that I qualify as a bear as well.
a black bear.
Yes.
So, so, um, so basically, so when you're dating, when you're thinking about dating in the homosexual world, if you're a top, you just wouldn't pursue other tops. Is that how it works? Like you're always kind of going for a bottom mostly. That's like what you're kind of into, or is there, or is it a little more fluid than that?
Well, so I'm pretty secure about my sexual predilections and my role in
Hmm.
all of the relationships that I've had and all of the sexual interactions that I've had.
Hmm.
But there's a kind of running joke within the gay community that a lot of bottoms like to masquerade as tops, and
Hmm.
it's something that I've thought about. I always wondered, why is that? Why is it that they do that? And if you think about the negative stigma that surrounds homosexuality, it invariably pertains to the femininity of a man or a homosexual. So a lot of
Hmm.
people like to kind of conceal that aspect of their personality and masquerade as someone who is more masculine. And you might find more of a propensity to do that in areas of the world where homosexuality is shunned. Um,
Okay, but
so
when you are dating though, would tops normally go for bottoms and vice versa?
yeah,
Is
like
that usually how it
generally
works?
speaking,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. So if there was, if you came across another top, you guys, there would just wouldn't be that compatible because maybe you're both quite masculine and you both want to give.
I'll antagonize a motherfucker. That's what I mean. Tops hate tops. I mean, real tops hate tops. I mean, it's just the same way that men don't like other men, especially when you're on the prowl, right?
Okay, fair enough. Okay, interesting. So keep going. Give us more of the dynamics of
So yeah,
a
I
gay
think
relationship
basically that's
and
what it is,
and
right?
also gay dating as well.
Yeah. So basically that's what it is, or that's what it comes down to.
Hmm.
So I think if you kind of just look at the role of a bottom, you could say
Hmm.
that it would be analogous to the role of a female in most
Yeah.
heterosexual relationships. And then the same with the top, that would be analogous to men in most
Hmm.
heterosexual relationships.
Yeah, and that makes sense. I guess in heterosexual relationships, the man is the giver and the woman is the taker. So it does follow along those lines, which I find quite interesting given um I don't know, for some reason maybe from an ignorant perspective, you'd think since two guys are in it, you didn't think that they would kind of follow these traditional um roles of masculine and feminine, but that does come through in gay dating as well, and gay relationship is
Yeah,
someone kind
definitely.
of occupies that masculine and feminine role. That's quite interesting. um so I kind of wanted to ask about, there's like something called like gold star, right? Where's is that what it's called, where you've never had sex with the opposite sex, you've only stayed gay your whole life? Is that called a gold star or
I've not,
something?
this is the first time I'm hearing about it.
Okay. So for a lesbian, for example, if they've never had sex with a man, what's their, they get like there's a name for that, right?
No idea. I mean,
Are you serious? You don't
I
know
mean,
this?
what you have to understand is Douglas Murray says this as well in his book, The
Hmm.
Madness of Crowds. And he
Hmm.
talks about how lesbians are completely different to homosexual males. Like, we very rarely consort with one another, and we tend to be
Hmm.
very different in personality and the way that we comport ourselves. So, I mean,
Hmm.
I wouldn't understand any terminology that lesbians use, but I've never heard of
So there's
that
no
word.
terminology for a man who's never been with a woman in the gay world?
But perhaps there is. I mean, I'm not aware of it.
Okay. Oh well, interesting. Okay. I've definitely heard of something that's called like a gold star. And basically if you've never been with the opposite sex, you're like a gold star or something like that,
Sure,
or a
but I mean,
gold
it's
star
not something
lesbian.
that we think about a lot. We don't care.
Okay, so that was my question then, because like obviously in the heterosexual world, like traditionally, like if
Like,
there's
why
like
is
a
it called gold star? Is it something to be
I,
proud of or
that
something?
no, that's just the terminology. Just like virgin, there's a name for someone who's never had sex
Oh, okay.
before in the
Yeah, I'm not
heterosexual
familiar
world.
with that. Mm.
Okay, interesting. So there's no special appeal then for, so if since you've had sex with a girl before, they don't really care. It's not like you're less special than someone who's never had sex
Oh,
with a
no,
girl from
not at all.
another man's eyes.
Not at all.
Okay, so that's not like a thing then.
No.
Okay, so that was one of my questions. One of the other things I think from a straight man's perspective is looking in outside into the gay dating world is that it's kind of hyper sexualized. So there's less of a courtship. It goes, it's more. You go on a date and quickly you can have sex with each other, and there's no like kind of stigmas attached. There's less dancing around. There's generally, I think people think homosexual people have a lot more sexual partners throughout their life. It's a lot more transactional. Do you think that's true?
To a degree. I mean,
What do you think drives that? Because I guess from my mindset, it would be because it's two men and you're both wired the same. There isn't this difference that this kind of awkward, men and women are quite different, wired differently, and you kind of have to kind of overcome this chasm between the two to get closer, and it's kind of awkward, and you got to do this like bit of a dance. But if you're two guys, it's really easy just to, you understand what you want because you're wired the same way as the other guy, and you guys kind of skip some of those introductory steps to sexual contact.
well, not.
That's my
Okay.
ignorant perspective. Is
No,
that
I think it's
any
a
way
reason.
accurate?
Yeah, it's a reasonable thing to assume, right? Um, I think that's where it comes to wisdom, right? I think. Okay, so let's go back to the binary concept of
Mm-hmm.
the giver and the receiver, whether you're
Mm-hmm.
heterosexual or homosexual. The dynamic is somewhat similar. The giver
Mm-hmm.
hunts, right? The
Mm-hmm.
receiver selects. So if a
Mm.
receiver continues to select anybody that makes an offer or an invitation to them, then this would be considered an what do they call it? An evolutionarily unstable strategy, right? Because you are going to lose value if you're going to accept every invitation that you get, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, in terms of the value structure that exists, especially in the Western society, I think a lot of perspicuity has been internalized into females to understand from the parents and the family that they should be very selective when it comes to their partners or suitors or prospects. Whereas with homosexuals, especially in our generation, I don't believe
Mm-hmm.
that a lot of receivers have been exposed to that kind of perspicuity. But what homosexuals do is, in the end, they do learn and they do become selective. And I can tell you that it's not easy
So
for
so
me to go out and select someone who is highly attractive to just have sex with me. Like, it's not that easy. Sure,
mm.
I can try and I can definitely pull. But in terms of the rate of being successful, it wouldn't be as high as me dropping my standards for someone who is less attractive.
So bottoms are generally more selective than kind of following that same feminine type role that we spoke about earlier.
Yeah, man. I mean,
Mm.
you're.
And
So go ahead.
yep. So okay, so that answers that question. I kind of wanted to go as well into maybe the stigmas and the judgment you might receive for gay dating. Obviously, for a long time, homosexuality was frowned upon or even persecuted and things like that. And obviously, not that long ago. And so there's still a lot of negative stigmas attached to homosexuality. Do you ever feel like you got to hide your affection or public affection or anything like that? Or do you feel judged when you're out on a date with a man? Um, Yeah. Do you get any insecurity
It's
around
funny that
that?
that was one of the questions that I had for you actually. So I've
Hmm.
also composed a list of questions that I have to
Hmm.
ask Tim today.
Hmm.
But yeah, like I mean, we definitely have to approach affection with circumspection, or a certain level of circumspection, depending on where you are, right? So I'm living in China. The idea of being homosexual is extremely foreign to a lot of people for obvious reasons.
Hmm.
And I guess it does exist in the West as well, to a large degree. Depends where
Hmm.
you are, depends how necessary it is. All of these things have to be taken into consideration.
Well, from your personal experience, have you ever felt judged, or do you feel like you have to hide any public affection or anything like that on a date with a guy?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay. And how does that impact what you do, or is, because obviously I think another preconceived notion there is from the straight world looking into the gay world is that um sex is a lot more kind of hidden, like you have to kind of do things in the shadows a bit more and things like that. Is that what that's driven from, is
No, not at
because
all.
it's kind of been underground for so long that you have to
I
keep things
mean,
hidden or anything like that?
well, I've only had a serious relationship whilst living here in China. So in terms of the
Mm.
way that public people would be affectionate in public in the West,
Hmm.
who
Hmm.
identify as homosexuals, would be different. I
Hmm.
mean, I have seen gay people be affectionate in public. It's funny because
In China?
no, not in China.
Okay.
Um,
Is it
in the
persecuted in
West,
China?
no,
Okay.
since 1997, I
Okay.
believe.
Interesting. So
Um,
so so obviously you lived in Spain before coming to China.
Very
And
different.
so when you lived in Spain, was there any would you kind of hide any kind of homosexual affection with your partner or anything, or whoever you were dating or with at that time? And how did that like
It's funny
kind
because
of
I was a lot more nervous. I think I was just shy.
Mhm.
Um, but other homosexuals around me. I mean, if you're around a gay club,
Mhm.
it's late at night, and most of the people around you are gay. Then
Yeah.
yeah, people are going to be affectionate with each other, especially when they've had a bit of alcohol.
Mhm.
But if you're in the supermarket at 8 o'clock in the morning, and there's like kids running around and a family, like no, probably not. But
Mm.
I would say that it's the same for heterosexuals, right? You're not going to start making out in the middle of an aisle in a
No,
supermarket
but
right at 8 o'clock in the morning.
no, of course not. But I mean, obviously, if I was dating a girl, I'd have no problem holding her hand in public, or giving
Uh
her a kiss in public without any fear of judgment or anything like that.
yeah,
That
well,
just doesn't even
it's
come into my
it's
mind.
it's definitely getting better, and it does depend on where you are in the world.
Hmm.
But it's never been a huge problem for me. I think it's just the circumstance that I've been subjected to. But yeah, I think you just have to use a bit of emotional intelligence, right, to kind of gauge
Hmm.
whether it would be permissible to act in that manner. And it's like I live with my boyfriend, so I don't feel the need to be affectionate in public. I spend most of my time at home, and there
Yeah.
I can be as affectionate as I want. So it's not a
Yeah.
huge problem for me. It's something that I've
Right.
acclimated to.
Interesting.
I was gonna ask as well. So
Yep.
you kind of touched on it before, but for heterosexuals, I mean, so it's funny because you kind of see it from the perspective of homosexuals being extremely, perhaps excessively receptive to a sexual interaction with someone that you've just
Very
met.
promiscuous. Yeah.
Yeah, indeed. So I was wondering about what the chances would be to have sex. So from your perspective, so unfortunately, we don't have a woman on this episode who can kind of vouch for what most women might think. So I'm kind of just asking it from your perspective as a heterosexual man. But what would you think the chances would be to have sex on the first date? with a woman depending on the attractiveness of the guy and the girl in question?
I don't think the attractiveness matters so much if they're both the same attraction level. I think if there's a big mismatch, um, there might be that might change things because obviously you need a bit of physical attraction to kind of engage in sex. I mean, you don't need to, but that helps for sure. For me, the chances are it depends. This is very subjective, right?
Low,
But
I guess, for you.
in my person, no. I think on a first date, it depends on what you're going for. So if I really like a girl, I'm not going to actually try and have sex with her on the first date. If I kind of don't like her, that's much more of a possibility, and I might pursue that. And if that is the case, it's 50% maybe or higher.
50%.
Usually,
That's high.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I do all right, but I think the harder part is from getting the date. So for me, I could be talking to on a dating app, for example, I could be talking to like 8 or 9 girls, and only 2 or 3 of those um, move on to a date, which is so there's kind of like these little obstacles you have to kind of get through to get to the date. It's like a job interview almost, right? You're in
So,
a
so do you
stack of
feel that
resumes.
when you're on the date, you're kind of halfway there? Is that how you feel?
Yeah, exactly. I feel like once I get to the date, like I've gotten through a lot of the process already, and now it's just being normal, uh, not being creepy, just being normal and having fun and enjoying yourself. And usually, if there's a mutual attraction there, it's pretty easy to have sex on the first date. I think this is quite a new phenomenon as well with online dating. Obviously, this is kind of proliferated a
Mhm.
hookup
Okay,
culture, I
so
think.
so if you
Yep.
have sex with a girl on the first date, would you take that girl seriously, or would you kind of understand that experience to just be a bit of fun?
That's a good question. So generally, like I said, if I do really like the girl, I'll generally not go for it for the first date because I do kind of want to make it a little more special, and I kind of want to like develop things a bit more. So just on that fact alone, if we have sex on the first date, then it is kind of it does kind of ruin that magic, and I'm probably not as interested
Ah,
anymore from that
okay.
point forward. So I might not pursue her as I would someone who I did like, and I decided to just not do anything at the end of the day. And sometimes if I really like them, we'll have quite a few dates before anything happens, and I'm completely fine with that. Um, but yeah, generally, if you do have sex on the first date, then you're less interested, in my perspective. But yeah, that's not a deal breaker either. If you meet someone on a crazy night out or something, and you guys come together and you guys are both drunk and you wake up and you guys actually quite like each other, then that could be the more likely way to develop into a relationship from having sex on your first encounter.
Ah, okay, interesting. It seemed very similar to the kind of dynamic that homosexuals would have as well.
Yeah,
Yeah, like if things are going well, if both of you are kind of feeling it, then it's a kind of like it's a why not sort of thing, right? But if it does happen prematurely, right, and that's what you both have to kind of understand it to be premature. If the
yeah,
sex is premature, then you're always going to have misgivings about
yeah,
whether you
exactly.
guys are actually compatible or not.
Yeah, and I think there's a cultural aspect as well. I was actually talking to one of my English friends, and he was saying that, and I think this is quite true. I think in England there is a bit more of a culture of where you kind of do hook up first, and then kind of decide whether um, you guys want to keep dating or moving on. Where I think in America there's a bit more of a culture where you kind of date and you kind of hold yourself out. I think America is a lot more religious than England as well, so I think some of those kind of pious mannerisms and cultural norms are a lot more prevalent in America than England. But um, I was told, and I've seen it myself, is that it does seem like in England there's a bit more of a casualness about hooking up quickly and then
Oh,
still
is that?
dating after that. Yeah.
I guess you've lived on both sides, so I guess you'd know.
Yeah, exactly. So I've seen it. Obviously, most of my dating experience has been in England, but Yeah, in America it's the same. Or sorry, in America it's a bit different there, where I think if you're dating someone, you might hold out a little bit more. Where yeah. So yeah.
Okay. So before you go on to your next question, I'm going to ask you one
Uh-huh.
more. Um, so how much does class come into play
Mhm.
when dating, and what sort of things indicate incompatibility? So when I'm talking about class, I'm talking about in
Mhm.
terms of mannerisms that will sort of um, portray a certain level of intellect or lower level of class. I'm just thinking
Yeah.
of like a stereotypical girl, let's say in Manchester, the kind of girl who's like, yeah, you got a fag or something.
Yeah.
It's like if
Um,
I does
for
I
sure.
mean, yeah, like how
So
do you approach that?
yeah, so I think people kind of date generally in line with their same socioeconomic situation. Not only I think most of that's because that's what you relate to. That's kind of what you're attracted to. I know for me, some English accents really don't do it for me.
Cheeky bastard.
And yeah, and whether that's related to
But
socioeconomic,
so
whatever.
okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but I think it's just like anything. You want to either be punching at your same weight or punching above your weight. Um, you don't ever really want to be punching below your weight. And it's just like, I think with attraction levels or with anything, if you're a very successful woman with a great job, you're going to want something similar in your partner, probably. And same, if you're, and there's nothing wrong with
So
either or, obviously.
have you ever been on a date where you've kind of picked up very quickly that this person
Yes.
that you're dating is yeah, from
That I'm punching below my weight.
yeah. In terms
Yes.
of, I
Yeah.
guess the only way I can articulate it is class, right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's definitely happened. I don't dismiss him. For me, I can be quite hedonistic where I'll try and have fun no matter who it is or what the situation is. I'll try and kind of have fun with it either way. Um, and I'm quite open. So I will definitely see it through and try. It's not like a complete dismissal where I'll just be like, no, like this isn't working. Like I'll try and see if there's some kind of spark there or something like that. But more often than not, there isn't a spark and there isn't any kind of long-term prospect, statistically speaking, in my experience.
So what other signs would that be? So you said one is accent, right? Are there any other signs?
Accent, how they articulate what their education level is, their mannerisms, how they hold themselves, how they dress, all that stuff comes into play to kind of form an opinion on where they're at from
Okay. Mm-hmm.
relative to where you're at. And for me, I can tell really quickly within 5 minutes generally where she stands between where I stand, where she sits on this class level or whatever. And I know quite quickly if there's going to be an attraction there, if there's kind of a long-term prospect. And then
But
of course
let's say the girl
Mhm.
is drop dead gorgeous. Would you still
Yeah.
go for it?
Yeah. So that's an interesting question. So yeah,
Didn't
so
take you long to think about
yeah,
that.
yeah. Unfortunately, it's a sad truth, but it kind of is. You'll discount. She's doesn't articulate very well. She hasn't been educated that much, or something. Whatever you find valuable in a partner.
Just prepare for
But
war,
they're
right?
but they're gorgeous. Then you'll let some of those things slide a little bit more. I couldn't even give you some intellectual reason why. That's just how it is. You'll
Mm,
put up with a little bit more. Um, yeah, yeah,
don't worry.
for
I've
sure.
I've been there. I've been there too.
Yeah, exactly. So this happens then in the gay dating world. Do you think?
Oh yeah, definitely. I
So
mean,
do you try and date along the same line socioeconomic situation that you're in, or does that not really matter? And this is actually a good segue to some of my other questions I had.
yeah,
But
I mean, it's always difficult to tell, right? And it's difficult to ascertain that before you even meet the person, because I
mhm,
mean, what most gay people have is a kind of liberal mindset to life.
Hmm.
So in terms of that political stance,
Hmm.
you can kind of assume that the person will be compatible with you on that note. Um, but yeah, you can definitely tell. There's I've been on dates where the guy's been decent looking, and as soon as I start speaking to them, yeah, you can tell that this person is speaking garrulously, or
What's that mean?
I mean, they're just waffling on, rambling on
Like,
about nonsense, right? There's
okay.
something extremely inconsequential, right? So yeah, I mean, I approach it the same way. I'm like, well, I'm here already. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's,
exactly.
it's one of them
Exactly.
ones.
So I kind of wanted to talk about gay dating and relationship to dating apps and kind of a before and after picture, because I think I always kind of had this notion that if you were out, for example, like you gave the grocery store example, or you're out whatever at a bar or something, um for a man it's really easy, right? If you see a woman and you're kind of attracted to them, and you can generally just go up, they're kind of heterosexual, and you can go try and engage with them. um So if you're not at a gay bar, you're just at a normal bar and you see a guy that you're attracted to, how do you approach that? Because chances are they're straight, right? Or can you tell from their mannerisms or anything like that? Um, how do you approach that if you do see a guy that you're interested in, you want to go talk to, and you're not in a gay bar or something like
So,
that? Are you hesitant about that?
so I have an empirical experience with this because um, the first when I came out, which was when I was 21 years old. Now I'm 29. Um, the first time I came out, it wasn't until about a year and a half after that I downloaded um, gay online dating applications to find other
Hmm.
men. And I
Hmm.
had such a desiccated, dry, parched patch in my life. Like I did not have any opportunities. It could also be because of where I was living, but it was so
Hmm.
difficult to find people. I was adamant to meet other gay men in an
Hmm.
authentic manner, but it's so
Hmm.
difficult because if you,
Hmm.
I mean, think of it. Imagine that you and I don't know each other. I meet you
Hmm.
in a bar and I assume
Hmm.
that you're gay. You're going to be
Hmm.
offended, right? It's kind of emasculating for a
That's
straight man,
interesting. That's very
right?
interesting. Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
I kind of
Mm.
tried that route before,
Mhm.
and it never ended well. So
Mhm.
um
So,
there was a stark difference between when I was
mm,
trying to date without using online social networking services and when I was. So yeah, it makes a huge difference. That you can't get away. And maybe another thing as well is that other people can't always tell that I'm gay when they meet me.
mhm. So I just kind of made a connection because obviously, you do kind of get this stereotypical like homosexual who's like very
There,
flamboyant and
yeah,
everything
yeah,
else.
yeah.
Do you think
So
that's kind of a reaction to say, "Hey, look, I'm gay. You can
yeah,
come talk to me. You can like
yeah,
come
yeah,
approach me,"
yeah,
and so
yeah,
it
yeah.
makes it really obvious for someone who wanted to
Yeah.
engage in
You
it.
could say it's the same with a girl. It's kind of like when you're in a relationship with a girl and they're wearing a super
Mhm.
short skirt and you're like, what like what purpose do you have? Girl, they want the attention. They want people to look at them and stuff, right?
Right,
So you could
right.
definitely
Interesting.
say
Yeah.
it's analogous to a bottom in a relationship as well. They like that
Right.
kind of attention. So usually you'll perceive things like more piercings and dyed hair
Mm,
and
mm.
more um,
Like
effeminate,
flamboyant type
flamboyant,
dress. Yeah.
ostentatious, yeah, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it
S-
definitely runs in
So,
parallel.
I guess that's related then to what you were saying earlier, is that you're kind of like the hunter, right? So you don't
Mm.
have to, you're actually going out and talking to someone. That's how you make it known that you're gay, where maybe someone who's a bottom has to like dress up. So, like, hey, I'm not a straight guy. I can be approached by whatever.
Yeah, and
So it
interaction
makes
is
sense.
key as well. I mean, as soon as you start
Yeah.
speaking or the way that you look at someone,
Hmm.
bottoms, they can always pick up on that as well. So
Hmm.
yeah, it definitely comes to play as well.
Mm. So are like really masculine men who are gay, are they almost always tops?
No, no,
Really? Okay, interesting.
no.
And
That's a conundrum for me. Even like sometimes I meet extremely masculine guys. I mean, it's kind of the in terms of what is being disseminated online and in pop culture is the
mhm,
idea that being masculine. So being masculine is being muscular.
mhm,
I don't like muscular guys. Like if a guy is
mhm,
more muscular than me,
mhm,
I'm probably not going to be into him. But
mhm,
every time I see gay guys depicted online or
mhm,
in social media, it's invariably showing a muscular, masculine kind of figure, and that kind of
mm.
confuses me. I don't know whether I have a kind of skewed understanding of what homosexuality is, or if it's just a misrepresentation of the reality,
Yeah.
which I would assume the latter.
So that kind of leads into my next question. So obviously there's a masculine, there's a top and a bottom. You know, there's a masculine and a feminine role being played in a homosexual relationship.
Potentially in
Um,
some of them, yeah.
okay. So for in that regard, so obviously in the heterosexual dating world, you know, at least from my background, I feel obligation to pay for a meal, to hold the door open, to do all these different things.
This is one of the
Um,
questions I was going to ask you.
so being one of the masculine, so in a masculine role in the gay world, are they expected to do that as well? Like pay for the
Oh
meal,
yeah,
hold open the door, like
we
be the
don't
protector, all that stuff?
we don't circumvent that either. I mean, yeah,
Interesting.
like I
Okay.
said, it's
So
dynamic, right? It's like if I want
right.
a beautiful guy, right, and
Hmm.
they're very effeminate, and
Hmm.
they're getting a lot of attention from other tops, and I go
Yeah.
into the date saying, "Oh, pay up," they'll be like, "Perhaps not," right? It's
Hmm.
like they get to select. So why would they select someone if they can find someone just as attractive as I am,
Hmm.
who's happy to pay for the date, right? And
Hmm.
the whole idea of courtship, so you're courting, right? You're
Hmm.
you're kind of manifesting this idea of comfort and attention, right? This is what you're
Hmm.
giving them. That's what you want to kind of show them. So it also exists in the gay world as well, at least in my
Mm,
case.
mm. That's quite interesting. I didn't actually know that. I figured because my other question, this is going to be kind of a dumb American question, but obviously for a domestic dispute between two guys, so obviously if I'm with my partner, we get into an argument, you know, it only stays verbal, or it should only stay verbal, obviously. Is it more like acceptable to like deal with things with
It's
like
funny
fist
because
fights and stuff?
I've heard of stories of gay people getting into physical altercations, but
Hmm.
for me, it's inconceivable the idea of. I mean, my boyfriend has pissed me off in ways that no other human being can, but I have never
Hmm.
ever thought about hitting him. Nor would
So
I ever.
is that because he kind of occupies this feminine role, so it'd feel like you're kind of beating up a girl? I guess that sounds really bad, but
Yeah,
do you
that's
get that? Do you get that same feeling like you'd be?
yeah.
It just wouldn't be fair, obviously. Yeah.
I mean,
Okay.
there's
Interesting.
also men that beat women, right? It does
Yeah,
exist.
of course, obviously,
So
yeah.
the
But I was
kind
just
of
wondering if it's more acceptable if you're like, all right, let's
no,
freaking,
there's not. I
you're
mean,
not doing
I'd
the
like
dishes,
to.
let's wrestle, like, or
I'd
whatever,
like
like,
to. If we could settle things that way from now on, I
yeah.
mean, of course, that would make my life so much easier. But relationships are not that easy. It's not like
Of
okay,
course, of
taking your
course.
jacket off, right? It's not that
Yeah.
simple.
So I kind of wanted to touch more on the gay dating app thing, because obviously Grindr's like a big, that is like the standard one, right? I'm sure there's a bunch of other ones,
So
but
yeah,
so that, do you think that's kind of like revolutionized gay dating? Because before, like you were saying, that it was so difficult to find anyone. I just kind of want to understand, what do you think your dating life would have been without this technology to kind of link you? It, because generally it feels like it's kind of underground. So obviously we live in the 21st century, this is 2022, and things are a lot different now, and it's celebrated as it should be, you know, who cares what your sexuality is or whatever. But before that, everything seemed kind of be underground. um how do you think gay dating played out before the dating apps? Because obviously dating apps, it's really easy, you can meet with someone, boom boom, you found another gay guy, but before, was it like a very underground situation, or would you only have like like a handful of partners throughout your dating life because it was so
Well,
rare to come by someone?
so there's several factors to consider, right? So
Hmm.
one is the whole innovation of technology and how it's facilitated um, gay relationships.
Hmm.
Another factor to consider is um, how some societies have kind of accepted, um, let's say, non-traditional sexual kind of predilections. So if we consider history and we consider the convenience of a relationship with another man, then it will be
Hmm.
easier to kind of understand the
Hmm.
potentiality of meeting another partner or another suitor, right?
Hmm.
So if, let's imagine a generation or two ago, if you are
Hmm.
homosexual,
Hmm.
okay, you're homosexual. Let's say you're a young man. Your
Hmm.
family assume that you're heterosexual. Your family
Hmm.
expect you to get married.
Hmm.
You don't have a 50-50 choice. It's not, oh, okay, I'm gonna choose a man to live. You've seen the movie Brokeback Mountain, right? I think that
No,
really, no, you've not, you ignorant
no,
cunt.
I know it.
You should watch it. It's
Maybe
a
I
great
will.
movie.
Maybe I
Yeah,
will.
it's a
Maybe
great
I
movie
will.
because
Okay.
it shows what the times were like, right? So even though these,
Hmm.
so in the movie, both of these guys are married, right? I think one of
Yeah.
them has
Oh,
kids
married with women.
with women, right? Yeah,
Okay. Yeah.
and no one really assumes them to be gay, but
Hmm.
the feasibility of being in a relationship together was almost impossible, right?
Hmm.
To the point where one of them just decided to give up the prospect completely. Um,
And
whereas,
was that because of like the social pressures or whatever? Because it just was so unacceptable
yeah,
in wherever they were at. Okay, fair enough.
exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas today, now, even in China, people can enjoy gay relationships in
Hmm.
society, right? So,
So, do you think it was much more suppressed probably prior to, well, first of all, prior to gay marriage and things like that being legalized, but so it kind of feels like it was some kind of desire that you had to push down and just you had to conform with normal society, you know, air quotes, but which I guess would add to an interesting dynamic. So I guess maybe that's where it kind of pushed things maybe to a sexualized level because you couldn't actually
okay.
have a
So
relationship or something like that.
it's funny because I was doing some research on the most popular um, online gay social networking services earlier
Hmm.
today.
Hmm.
And I came across one app. It's called, what's it called? Let me put it up. Um, Basically, this app is kind of designed to facilitate um, dogging or cruising. Do you know what that is?
No idea. That sounds fun though. What is it?
So
I mean,
it's
I have ideas, but
it's basically homosexual men having
mhm,
sex discreetly in public
mhm.
places. So I think
Okay.
it's called cruising because I think it started on cruise ships or something, like people would.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah, I think so. And another term for it is dogging. So
So is
this
this a
is
prominent thing then in
this is very
the
prominent.
homosexual world?
Yeah,
Very interesting. And why do you
especially in the
think that
West.
is?
Yeah,
Really?
that
Oh,
I believe that's how it began.
is that, do you think that's kind of born out of what we were just talking about, where
Yeah,
things
indeed.
had to be underground and so you kind of would go into this random public
Yeah, because
bathroom stall or something?
that's how people started. They started soliciting in public areas that would consist of only men. So I believe it began in places like public lavatories and such. And from there,
Wow. Hmm.
yeah.
So do you think, even though that, homosexuality now is like celebrated, and all this other stuff, so that still is a huge.
So there's
Hmm.
still, so I believe I'm in a generation where it's becoming, it's become a lot more acceptable for people to
Hmm.
be gay and live gay lifestyles with partners
Yeah.
and such. Whereas just a generation ago, let's say our parents' generation, there are still people who are gay, who are married, who have kids,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
it would be completely inconceivable as well as inconvenient for them to come out, right?
Hmm.
Um, you might see it as well in popular culture as well, that a lot of older men are starting to come out as well.
Hmm.
Um, so what do these older men do, right? And what have they been doing for the past 2 decades, right? So they've
Dogging
got,
then.
yeah, man, like they've definitely probably right been up to it because it exists. And the idea is just a completely no strings attached kind of venture into the sexual homosexual kind of
Yeah,
experience.
I guess it kind of feels like they would have their kind of fake life, but in order for them to maintain that, they'd have to go out and do dogging or whatever, and then that kind of keeps them going for in their relationship and maintain their life that's
Yeah,
basically kind of fake. Yeah.
of course, yeah. I think
Hmm.
that's how they got by, and it still exists.
That's quite interesting. And so how do you think, because obviously, um first of all, just out of curiosity, when did you know you were gay?
Um, so I've thought about that.
Hmm.
Um, I tried to think of like the earliest homosexual kind of thought I had. Maybe I think as
Hmm.
early as grade one. That's the earliest gay memory that
Wow.
I have. How
Okay,
old would I have
interesting.
been? I think is that I forget. So 6 or 7 or
Because I
something.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Because I was quite interested in, obviously, once you get to high school or sixth form, if you're in England, um, you know, boys and girls, and all the hormones are flowing, and you start to date and all this other different stuff. I kind of wanted to understand what your experience was. Obviously, from my experience, you wanted to have a girlfriend. That was like a cool thing to do, and all this other stuff, and that was kind of, yeah, and at that age, people are pretty savage. So if you are doing anything outside of the norm, you're going to be targeted heavily. Um, how did that impact the way you dated? So you mentioned that you did date a girl. Was that just from social pressures, what you were supposed to do?
No, not
Or
at
did
all.
you engage in any kind of dogging or anything like that? Or is there
No,
any
no,
outlet essentially
no.
at that age?
So for me, um, so it would have been, you guys call it middle school, secondary school
Hmm.
for us. Um, I actually went to a boys' school,
Hmm.
um, and this school was predominated by Muslims, right? And they
Hmm.
tend to be extremely intolerant to the idea of
Hmm.
homosexuality. I even
Hmm.
recall having a day to kind of
Interesting. Yeah.
celebrate the awareness of the homosexual struggle. And I remember my classmates being completely intransigent to the idea. And
Hmm.
again, most of my classmates were Muslim, so it was. Uh, I mean, I was kind of going through puberty. We also weren't around females in our school, so I didn't think about it much. I mean, I was very
Mm.
young. I just thought about football and just kind of surviving in a kind of shitty, dire situation that we call secondary school in the UK, or
Yeah,
public secondary
obviously.
school at least. So I didn't think about it at all. It was only until I
Okay.
went to college, which was sixth form,
Hmm.
tertiary
Hmm.
education, that we started to get introduced to girls. And that's when I realized, oh, I'm kind of attractive. I'm getting some attention from girls, right? And I just like
Hmm.
the attention. I was pretty
Hmm.
sure that I was gay at that point, but I was
Mm.
about 16 and I thought, maybe it's just a phase. That's something that I'd heard a few times. And um, yeah, that phase didn't disappear,
Didn't
right? I
last long.
guess.
All right. So my other question was as well, is there a difference between how you approach dating, obviously before coming out of the closet and after? Are you like, is it like you come out of the closet, people know, so you can do you kind of start to try and date more actively? And And prior to
that's what I
coming
did.
out, is it pretty suppressed? Okay, fair
Yeah,
enough.
I mean, I think that was the reason why, for the first year and a half or so, that I
Mm-hmm,
didn't use online dating. I was still getting to know myself. I was still
mm-hmm,
used to the insecure, um, obsolescent version of myself.
mm-hmm,
So I kind of had to learn how to behave and comport in public as this new version of
mm-hmm,
myself. And perhaps
mm-hmm,
that's why it took a while, because I knew that I could date people authentically. I could go up to girls or guys in bars. So to
mm-hmm,
rely on this social networking application just to get an opportunity to date someone was pretty difficult for me to accept,
mm.
until it was something that was necessary
You're
for me.
very comfortable with, yeah, interesting. So I feel like we've talked quite a bit about kind of the early stages, like the maybe the sexual aspect, the aspect in a relationship between masculine and feminine. But also, what I'm quite interested in is when it comes to actually trying to find a partner. Obviously, when you're quite young, um, things are a bit more flippant. You're exploring a lot, you're hooking up a lot, blah, blah, blah. But eventually you get to a point where you actually want to find a partner and start to settle down and things like that. I was kind of interested in what, if there's any differences in the heterosexual world to the homosexual world. In my ignorant mindset, it feels like it'd be harder to try and find a more of a permanent partner, maybe. And I think maybe with Grinder and all this other stuff, there's a lot of, and just in the heterosexual world, there's a lot of option now that makes it a lot harder to settle with one person. Kind of always has this grass is greener situation. But do you think it's harder to find more of a life partner or a serious partner in the homosexual world? And if so, why?
Ooh, so there's several layers to this answer, I
Hmm.
guess. One thing that has to be considered is me being part of the ethnic minority growing up in the UK.
Hmm.
So perhaps that had something to do with the experiences that I potentially would have dating in Europe,
Hmm.
because I wasn't properly out until I was in Spain. So I can't
Hmm.
really talk about the experience of seriously dating in the UK. But in Spain, at least, I didn't have. So I think a lot of people are familiar with the stereotypes that people have of
Hmm.
black masculine men when it comes to
Hmm.
sex, right?
Hmm.
So a lot of people kind of um, put me into that stereotype, which was beneficial for me in many ways. For transitory kind of sexual experiences, sure, but for
Hmm.
anything more serious, it wasn't beneficial for me at all. So I kind
Hmm.
of got used to that lifestyle. And I don't know whether it was my age, I
Hmm.
don't know whether it was my maturity, my
Hmm.
level of understanding of the gay community, attraction,
Hmm.
and so forth. Like I don't really know exactly what it was, but
So you were
I think
feeling it
it's,
out, kind of.
yeah, yeah.
And so let's fast forward. Obviously, you have a boyfriend now that you're quite serious with. How did that progress? Like, what was the kind of steps that led you to have a relationship with him and want to engage in a monogamous relationship? Just I want just to kind of lay out the steps, and then we can see if there's kind of differences
Yeah, I
from a
mean,
heterosexual
I think
perspective.
everyone in the back of their mind wants to have a relationship, right? I
Yeah.
think the way that we grow up, especially in the West, we have this idea of this, from watching Disney movies and such, this idea of
Hmm.
this prince or this princess, right? Or this king or
Yeah.
queen who is going to be your partner. And that is kind of
Hmm.
what we all aspire to
Yeah.
towards when we're dating, right? It's
Hmm.
only as we date do we become disillusioned by the idea that that perfect person exists. Because if that
Hmm.
person does exist, then who says that you are a king or a queen or a princess or a prince, right?
Hmm.
So you begin working on yourself, and then you kind of settle with the best that you can get. So
So
that, I would guess, that exists in the heterosexual world, and it
yeah.
exists in the homosexual world as well.
Hmm. So is that kind of how you ended up? So basically, you went on a date with your boyfriend, and you guys just really hit it off or whatever, and then you went on more and more dates, and then decided to be exclusive or something like that? Did it kind of go along those lines?
So I said before, like living in kind of where I've lived has been a factor as to
Mm-hmm.
my success rates in terms of dating. But
Mm-hmm.
I genuinely do believe that our meeting was somewhat serendipitous, right? Um,
Mm-hmm.
and it was kind of romantic, I guess, the way, because I do perceive him as a beautiful human being.
Mm-hmm.
So when I started dating him, I knew from the beginning that I was always going to try to manifest
Interesting.
a
Okay,
better side
interesting.
of myself, and that's how the relationship has been to date. Um, so yeah, I would imagine that it's not much different to a heterosexual relationship. So it's like the whole idea. So a question that I was going to ask you as well is
Mm-hmm.
like, who do you think should pay for the first date? So as soon as I dated my boyfriend, I was like,
Mm-hmm.
no, like no way. Of course, like he offered, which said a lot, but there's no way that I was going to let him pay, right?
Yeah.
Um, so yeah.
Yeah. So for me, for sure, I'll generally pay on, definitely on the first date. Most likely, most dates, to be honest. I feel like um, I'll generally pay for the meal, even if I'm dating the person for like a year or something. That doesn't really change. I guess it would change maybe if the other, my partner had a, was quite well off, and it was a different dynamic that way. But I think it was just maybe the way I was raised. Chivalry was something that was instilled in me, and it just feels like that's kind of my role. Yeah, so I'm not sure if that's a personal thing. I'm sure a lot of people are in the same boat. I think things are modernizing, and maybe things might be changing that way, especially. Yeah, but for me, for sure, I always pay for the first, second, third, and so on dates. If they really insist, I'll let them pay half or whatever. Because if it makes them
But isn't
feel
it like,
better or empowered, then yeah.
so if a girl will kind of just expected it, right? Like she's like, come on,
Yeah,
like chop chop,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
then would you
No,
still pay?
um yeah, but that would be a turn off for
Probably
sure.
the last date, exactly right. So yeah,
Yeah,
it's the same.
it
Right?
would definitely be a turn off. Yeah, I
Yeah, it
think
means
as
a
long
lot.
as they make the effort to try and
Mm,
pay, and then you're
mm.
like, no, 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 like I'll pay. It gives you that satisfaction of
Yeah,
paying, where if they're
yeah,
like, yeah, yeah, pay for my meal, peasant, and you're like, well, this, it's not fun, it's not fun to pay at that point,
exactly.
but I'd still do it because I'm a peasant and I do what I'm told. So um no, but yeah. Yeah. What's weird though is I'm not sure if that's changing. I feel like that's kind of changing. I feel that's a little, when I go on dates now and I do pay on the first date or the second date or whatever, um, sometimes I get like this surprise or like this like pleasant surprise, like, oh, that's really nice of you, blah, blah, blah. And from talking to some of the people I've dated in the past, that's not always the case. They do pay for half, and that's just kind of normal for them.
Yeah, that's not normal for me either. If someone
Yeah.
pays for the meal on a date, then I
Hmm.
would see that as an affront, and I would just imagine, okay, this person hates, they dislike me that much that they're ready to pay, and I'm like, okay, then I'll probably won't see them again. That's how it's been for me.
Okay.
Or if they
Okay.
even insist to go half, like if I'm like, no, 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 I insist, and they still want to pay half after I insist, then I kind of perceive that as them declining.
Really interesting. Okay. Yeah, I mean, for me, if they insist to pay half, I find it quite endearing. Like I like this sentiment. Um, yeah, yeah, that's a perfectly fine thing from my perspective.
Okay.
So my other question about dating in a serious level is obviously eventually, if you like the person enough, you want to make them your life partner or get married or something like that. Do you feel the process is different for a homosexual couple? So for you and your boyfriend, if you wanted to eventually officially make him your life partner, do you think that the same kind of cultural steps apply, like in terms of asking him to marry you, he's your
Yeah.
fiance, you do a wedding, all those, you would still subscribe to all those ceremonies that we have in the West for
In a
marriage.
way, yeah, it's funny because before I started dating seriously, I always
Hmm.
imagined that it's not something that I care about. Like I thought,
Hmm.
yeah, I don't need to get married. But
Hmm.
when you're in a relationship with that person and you really want to
Hmm.
show them how much you care for them, the only way
Hmm.
really that you can do that is by marrying them, right? So from a guy's perspective, it's funny because I've kind of theorized this before with the people that I've spoken to
Hmm.
about marriage. But I believe that these milestones in relationship tend to
They.
benefit the woman more, right? Like the
Hmm.
idea of that's why a man proposes to a woman, right?
Hmm.
The man is supposed to, if they're chivalrous, then they're supposed to kind of ask the girl to be theirs, right? It's
Hmm.
kind of
Hmm.
some kind of possession, right? That's the idea, and the girl kind of accepts. So in terms of being romantic, that exists in
Hmm.
the homosexual world as well. And whilst being
Hmm.
in a relationship, I've understood that, yeah, it is a kind of necessity that I can never really manifest the love that I have for my partner unless
Hmm.
I have access to these.
So these ceremonies that basically you pledge allegiance to your partner for the rest of your life type situation. I agree. I think those.
It's not about that. It's more about just giving your partner that experience, like believing that your partner deserves to have that experience, and just because they were born in the way that they were born, or they're
So,
in the circumstance
so
that they're in, that they don't get to have that experience ever. Like it's pretty cold.
is it kind of standard or stereotypical for a bottom to kind of hope for a marriage one day, and same way a woman would, where they kind of
Like I
fantasize
said,
about it,
it really does depend on where you are. I mean, here,
right?
if you're
Here
gonna
it's in
if you're gonna
China.
fantasize about that and you're living in China, then good luck. Do you know what I
Mm.
mean? But in the West, I think, yeah, like people growing
So
up gay now, they can kind of expect to have
right,
that experience with the partner.
okay, interesting. That's all I got for that.
Sweet. Okay. Okay. I'm gonna. It's a bit of a topic changer, but this is something that
Yeah.
I've been very curious about in terms of
Uh-huh.
heterosexuals. I guess to a degree, it exists with homosexuals, but it's definitely more prevalent in
Hmm.
the heterosexual world. So the next
Hmm.
question is, for you, Tim, is
Hmm.
plastic surgery a turnoff?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah, definitely, definitely.
it is.
um yeah, for me it for sure is. I know maybe some guys that's not.
Like absolutely.
Well, I think to the face for sure that's unattractive to me. So if you get your lips done or something like that, you can just tell too much. There's something that's unnatural about that, and I find anything unnatural kind of unattractive. So I like a natural beauty. And I like someone who's quite confident in themselves as well. So that indicates to me that there's probably some insecurities, and if they think their lips are bigger, that's not very attractive to me. Obviously, if they get their boobs done or something like that, I mean, and boob jobs happen all the time in
So
terms
so
of
you say
for
obviously, but it's not obvious to me. Like, so is
right.
that acceptable?
Interesting.
Getting a boob job?
Well, I think some girls get boob jobs because their boobs are too big, and it's more practical for those type of things. I think are completely fine.
Okay.
And I don't necessarily find that unattractive, to be honest. Definitely things with the face. I've seen that a lot in England. It's the same thing. If you put a ton of makeup on your
Oh,
face,
really?
it
How can
just
you
it
tell?
feels, um if they've had work done or
Yeah,
with makeup,
if they've had work done.
it's just obvious. You can, for example, for lips, like you can just tell. I mean, it's a very unnatural look. um and it just doesn't fit on their face, as
Mm-hmm.
well. You can tell. If you can tell something's been done, then there's just something off from the natural flow of your face, and then it's like boom, you got these giant lips, you know what I mean? And for me, it's the whole thing. I don't find that physically attractive, and I think where that comes from, if people are trying to, it comes from a place of insecurity, right, as well. And me personally, I like someone who's quite confident in themselves and their own beauty, and,
So
and
so
maybe don't put so much stock in their beauty as well, maybe
so it
more
might come
stock in
from
their intellect and things.
insecurity. Do you think that it could also come from a dearth of intellect? Is that possible?
Probably, probably.
Like, is there a kind of girl that would do that in terms of how you perceive women?
I'm sure. And to be honest, there's the other aspect of it that I'm not talking about, because obviously, just like women, everyone wants to feel beautiful. And if that makes you feel more beautiful,
But I think that there's
then
more of a societal pressure. That no, that there is a societal pressure for women to
mm,
be beautiful. Men, I
I
mean,
agree. No, of
you can't
course.
really ascribe the word beautiful to a man unless they're
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
extremely
Well,
attractive, right? So,
I mean, that's why men work out, right? A lot of men work out for aesthetic purposes, not functional purposes. And that's because they want to feel confident and they want to feel good. So I completely understand from
feeling
that
good,
perspective.
yeah, but that's different now. I think feeling good about having worked out and being in good shape
No, I'm not talking about
in
the
comparison
physical
to,
feeling you get from a workout. Like if you look good, you kind of feel good, right? Just
but
like if
that's
a
not the only
girl,
reason why people work out, though, is
I'm not saying that's the only reason. I'm
it? Mm.
saying that that is just what people do. That's a positive externality, and some guys do just work out for aesthetics. You know what I mean? Um,
But
so
I,
what
I still think that it doesn't necessarily run in parallel to the beauty of a woman. A woman can't work towards their own beauty. Any man could work out. If they work out long enough, then sure they'll get a hot body. Whereas
mhm.
not even if a woman, some women could work out every day, almost every day for 10 years and still not be beautiful.
I mean, I'd have to disagree there. I think it,
Oh, really? Okay,
that's
okay.
a weird. I mean,
Because I also I don't believe that either. I believe that there is something exotic about every single person in the world. And if that everybody looked after themselves, then they can be perceived as beautiful by someone, right?
yeah,
If you look after
of
yourself.
course, I completely agree with that.
But
I
I do
completely
believe
agree
that
with
there's
that.
so much more of a societal pressure on women to look beautiful, just as there is within the homosexual community as well. Like
Hmm.
bottoms should look physically attractive; they should look beautiful,
Mm,
as opposed to
mm,
men. Men should look masculine. Men should
hmm.
be in shape and so forth.
Well, like you said, I mean, yeah, for me, for sure. I mean, there is a need to feel beautiful, and to me, that's a valid need. You know what I mean? That's why what I was saying about that is that if you do get your lips done, and this is maybe where I was saying maybe there's an intellectual argument for this, and it makes you feel better, it makes you feel
Ah,
confident because
okay, okay.
that's something that you were insecure with before, then I think that that's fine. I completely understand that
Well, I think a lot of
sentiment.
people would
I
try
just
and
personally don't find that physically
a lot of
beautiful.
people would
Yeah.
justify having undergone some kind of surgery for that. I think invariably that's what I've heard, that women,
Yeah.
they say, "Oh, my lips are super huge," but if you feel better about yourself, babe, then go ahead, like do it, right? That's what I'm hearing,
Hmm.
and I'm like,
Hmm.
sure, you might feel good about yourself, but in terms of the way that most people perceive you, they're not feeling good about what they see, right? If they're seeing some kind of insecurity or whatever.
Do it.
So
I don't find it physically attractive
exactly.
personally.
But if you're saying that if that person, if that girl feels good about themselves from having undergone surgery, is that okay?
Yeah, of course. I mean, do what you got to do to make
Okay.
yourself, feel good and look good. If that what makes you happy in your life, then do that. I personally just don't find that physically attractive, but I don't have any qualms with anyone that does that.
What about
It,
ass? Are you an ass guy or a tits guy? It's one of the obnoxious
um,
heterosexual questions.
uh, yeah. So definitely more of an ass guy for sure.
Oh, you are? Okay. So what about
Yeah.
work done on a girl's ass?
No,
No.
no.
What
If I
about like
if I
fucking Nicki Minaj? Isn't she like supposed to be
no
this amazing? Or is
no
it just
no
you? You're just not.
no.
You're just
Yeah, if someone had their ass done, I would be that would be a turn off to me as well. I like someone who's just quite fit, to be honest.
no, no, no. I'm talking
Yeah.
about. So the reason I asked that question
Hmm.
is because to some degree it's starting to become existent in the
Hmm.
homosexual world as well, especially here in
Hmm.
Asia. I don't know if you know
You
about.
mean plastic surgery?
Yeah, yeah. Like there's a lot more
Okay.
people getting it done. It's become a cultural norm here in Eastern Asia. It's kind of scary. And I do believe that there is a lack of understanding. It's like you're fucking with biology here. Are you that arrogant that you believe that you can fuck with biology and make yourself more sexually attractive to another human being, biologically speaking? It's like, come on.
Well, yeah, I think as well it comes into play with technology as well. This like new term biohacking's coming into play more. Um, and I think this could kind of fit into that somehow, where the surgeries are getting a lot cheaper, a lot more prevalent. I mean, you can kind of make yourself look however you want. So if you don't like the way you look, there's options for you. And
Mm,
I guarantee there's a lot of people in this world who are insecure about the way they look. And if they can change that, they're probably doing that. And it's probably getting more prevalent just
yeah, yeah.
economically
You get someone at
and
the right
everything else.
age when they're feeling. I mean, there was times when I felt super insecure about things that people have kind of complimented me about as I've grown older. So yeah, you get someone at the right age when they're susceptible to
Yes.
that, then yeah, I'm sure the wallet will come out.
And just out of curiosity, what's kind of the major plastic surgery that a homosexual man would be getting that you've seen? Is it
Type
like
C.
lips, or is it, or like it, you said it's becoming a lot more prevalent in Asia. What kind
Ah,
of plastic surgery
I
are
think
men
it's
getting done?
face,
Okay.
something to do with
Like
yeah.
nip.
Actually,
Okay.
I mean, it's prevalent in with women in Asia. I don't know
Mm,
what I don't know about men, but I'm saying that
okay.
it's definitely. I think it's beginning to enter the
Yeah,
homosexual.
I think this is might be getting a little off topic, but I think this is kind of driven by the prolific nature of dating apps now. Is that everything is very
Oh
superficial?
yeah, I can't
You're
stand
literally
that.
looking. Everything's becoming all about aesthetics. You don't even talk to someone if they don't look really good in their
It turns
pictures
me
and
off
things like that.
if I see a bunch of pictures and the person looks perfect in every picture, I'm intimidated.
Hmm.
I'm like, I can't fucking keep up with this. Like, that's not me every day. I'm not fucking with that. Like,
Well, yeah, I think that's what the selective nature has kind of been shifted to a lot more, is based on aesthetics because of dating apps. And so this might lead women to want to fix their nose or their lips or whatever now,
yeah, it's a
because
shame.
things are so much more based on aesthetics for
Yeah.
date, especially through dating apps,
I
because
think
you don't talk to someone unless
if
you're.
someone's been bothered by something, let's say the whole childhood, let's say you've got an extremely big nose and
Mhm.
it's something that's troubled you throughout most of your life growing up, then I think that surgery would be warranted in that situation.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
when it's
I
just
agree.
to make yourself look prettier, I think it's pretty ignorant to do that because you don't necessarily understand how your imperfections could be attractive to somebody else. And that's
Yeah,
the issue that I have with the
yeah.
prevalence of plastic surgery.
Yeah, and from my perspective, it's a very subjective thing. So it's like I
Yeah,
personally don't find it attractive, but you don't know someone else's struggle.
yeah,
If
yeah.
if that's a huge thing, they can't stop thinking about it all the time. And if they do that, that makes them more confident and can move on with their life. Then go for it. You know what I mean? It's no value judgment on my behalf there. But what else you got for me?
Was the next one. So it kind of is related to plastic surgery. So
Hmm.
this one's a bit more trivial. So what do you think to
Hmm.
makeup? Like, is makeup a factor when you're dating a girl?
Yeah. So like I said, this kind of falls under the line of, I personally find girls with a more natural beauty more attractive. And so, of course, like if they wear like a little eyeliner or whatever, that's completely fine as long as you still get their natural essence. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But especially in England, for whatever reason, they can really cake it on. You know, there's a lot of makeup lathered on, and I find that quite unattractive. It's kind of, this goes along the same vein of plastic surgery for me, where it's like
Mm.
you're trying to make yourself look different from what you actually are. And I find that fairly unattractive.
I see. Yeah, I guess it makes sense. You're kind of spoken around it already. Yeah, we're seeing there's a lot of homosexual men who wear makeup as well.
Really?
And
I didn't know that.
yeah, I mean, it if they wear a lot of it as well, it does turn me off because
Hmm.
it's kind of like, especially if you're on a date, you're thinking you're supposed to be impressing me. So you think you're
Yeah.
impressing me by wearing makeup. It's like, no,
Yeah.
I'm attracted to men, not fucking this masquerade that you have.
Yeah.
So yeah, it tells me that they don't understand themselves enough. So it's a kind
Mm,
of insecurity, I guess, as well.
okay. So, do you have any more questions? I want to ask my final
You can go ahead. Okay, you got one more.
controversial question. Okay.
Yes.
Do you think being gay is a curse or a blessing?
Mm. Okay, so the way that I'm going to articulate the answer to this question is
Hmm.
by my perspective. So it's futile trying to conceive of a life. It's like me trying to conceive a life that I'm where I'm heterosexual
Hmm.
is just as futile as conceiving a life being white, right? It's a waste of
Hmm.
time. It's not going to get me
Hmm.
anywhere. So
Yeah.
I've not thought of that, right? Of course,
Hmm.
life would be easier if I were heterosexual. Actually, no, I say that, but perhaps it wouldn't be. Perhaps
Hmm.
my hardship would be manifested in other ways, right?
Hmm.
Who's to
Hmm.
say that? If anything, I do believe it's been a blessing because
Mm,
it's made me grow up quicker. It's made
mm,
me, it's forced me to understand the authenticity of the relationships that I have with
mm,
people from a very
mm,
young age, right?
mhm,
It's definitely been the hardest experience that I've gone through in my life because
mhm.
it pertains to the relationships that I have with the very people who brought me up, right?
Yeah.
So in that essence, it's been difficult. But with that being said, if I were to have a child, would I
Mhm,
want them to be homosexual? No, I wouldn't
mhm.
want them to be homosexual
That's
because I
interesting.
would like them to have the life that is as easy as possible. It's the same reason why
Mm,
so a lot of people might want a boy instead of a girl. Life
mhm,
is by and large easier for boys in terms of, well, perhaps in let's say a few generations ago. Now it's very safe in the West, right? And
mhm.
um, providing girls have enough wisdom, life can be a lot better than
Yeah.
life might be for men. So yeah, I
Yeah.
guess it depends who you ask. But yeah, like I would want an easier life for my child.
So that's quite interesting to me. So just to kind of recap on that, you think obviously it gave you extra struggles growing up and things like that. And obviously you've transformed as a result of that. You became better because of those struggles. You became stronger. So it's a blessing in that respect.
Yeah.
Um, but you wouldn't want that for your kids.
It's not that I wouldn't want that because
Hmm.
if my child was gay, they won't have to suffer what I suffered. I'm going to be
Right.
extremely receptive to the idea of my child even being transgender,
Hmm.
insofar as I would, insofar as them living a kind of normal childhood, right?
Mm.
So yeah, my kids, it's again, it's inconceivable because my kids would never have to suffer what I have had to.
Do you think from obviously you've been you know a lot of homosexual men. Do you get the sense that they have the same view as you, or do you think it's or do you think you're an
Uh,
exception?
that's very complicated. I mean, having
Okay. Yeah.
lived
Fair enough.
in the West and the East, people
Hmm.
perceive, even homosexuals perceive homosexuality in a very different way. I met a guy,
Mm.
a Mexican guy. He was cool, um,
Hmm.
and I got into a conversation with him, and he ended up saying something along the lines of, "Oh, yeah, I'm a Christian." And I asked him, "Oh,
Hmm.
you're a Christian?" I said, "But isn't Christianity intolerant to homosexuality? Like, what do you think of that?
Hmm.
And he says,
Hmm.
yeah, like, I believe it's wrong. And I'm like, what? It said, so
Hmm.
he's like living openly homosexual and he still believes that homosexuality is wrong. And
That's
he
quite
was like,
interesting.
yeah.
Yeah.
I,
So
I
he would
thought he
see it
was
as a
quite ignorant.
curse.
Yeah, definitely. And he was
Interesting.
older than
Okay.
me at the time as well. But that was, yeah, that was interesting that someone would see that. But most
Hmm.
of the homosexuals that I've met, like, no, they understand that it's not something that you choose and that it's pertains to biology and so on. So
Interesting.
I think a
Yeah.
lot of homosexuals do understand that. But one thing that is interesting in terms of the West and the East is that because in the West, the idea of having or living a homosexual lifestyle in our
Hmm.
generation is feasible,
Hmm.
opposed to the East, you do kind of try to ascertain the difference in terms of whether someone is just using excuses not to live the lifestyle that they have been predestined to live. And I think that was
Hmm.
a reason why I kind of ended my last relationship, is because my ex had no intention to divulge his sexuality to the people who were closest to him. And
Hmm.
from my perspective, his reasons weren't justified. So
Hmm.
I do believe that, especially in the East or even in Muslim countries where people are completely intolerant, if people do come out, they're extremely courageous for doing so.
Yeah.
But at the same time, just because somebody doesn't come out in a country that isn't receptive to the idea of homosexuality, it
Hmm.
doesn't necessarily mean that they're not. So it's complicated in that sense.
Okay. Interesting. That's all I got.
Cool. Okay, so some of the questions that I have for you, I guess, just come from the ignorance that any homosexual would have, or not having ever to interact with girls, I guess. But what something that
Hmm.
I've perceived a lot in the heterosexual world is this
Hmm.
ridiculous level of competitiveness
Hmm.
between men when it comes to dating women.
Hmm.
So, for, in your opinion, Tim, what do you
Hmm.
believe to be the prerequisites for a man to be able to date a girl?
The prerequisites.
For a man, yeah.
Well, I think obviously, like we talked about before, is that anyone can find a partner on their same level. So, so for example, if
So you believe that any any man can just date a girl?
yeah, I think there's probably a partner, someone out there for everyone
Really?
in my mind.
I
Yeah.
don't
So I
believe that.
think so. Give me an example of what you think
Well, I've met
from
people
a.
who really struggle dating, and
Mhm.
they, I do believe that a lot of it comes down to.
Okay, so I got some prerequisites. I
Yeah.
think you have to be somewhat emotionally available. Um,
What do
you
you mean
have to
by
be
that?
open to commitment. You got to be willing to be a little vulnerable, or else the relationship won't work. So that's kind of a
Mm.
prerequisite. Um, I think that you have to be open to commitment, um, and compromise, or else the relationship's not going to work either. So I think those are more the prerequisites rather than anything physical or anything like that. I think it's more about a mindset. You have to be in a certain mindset, and women know. So like if you're just looking to hook up all the time or something like that, women know, you know what I mean? So you're, you know, you're going to be treated as such, you know, like I heard recently the phrase sex pest, you know, you're just going to be a sex pest to them, you know? Um, and so, yeah, I think those things are necessary prerequisites to start dating a girl
Okay, so
successfully.
how do you explain um, almost this pandemic of men who,
Hmm.
in Western society and in Eastern society as well, of
Hmm.
men who just can't date women? What do you attribute that to?
I think it's just kind of the hookup culture that's really started to proliferate. I think with dating apps, especially. I mean, I struggle with this myself. You know, it's when you meet, when you try and meet someone out. So if I see a pretty girl at a bar that I really want to talk to, it's just kind of a big deal. You know, I got to build up courage. I do this whole thing. It's really scary. And then, you know, if they happen to say yes to giving me their number or something like that, this whole process starts, and all that effort and work, you don't throw that away very easily. You kind of try and make this relationship happen. Now we're in this dating app world where, you know, I can pick between 100 different people, and I've, you know, this many matches, and half of them I just decide not to talk to. It's there's so much choice now. It's so easy. That entry level is so easy now, um, that you're way more flippant about having a relationship. It's way easier just to not have a relationship. You know what I mean? There's not all that upfront effort that you put into it, which makes you cherish it more, and make it want to work more, because you went through this kind of awkward building courage and doing all this different things to get the girl that you wanted in the first place. Now, you know, you're swiping through and there's like 10 pretty girls, and
Mm,
it just like anything, it's just like economics, right? You know, if there's a lot of something, it's worth less to you. Um,
yeah.
and you need them to be worth more for you to engage in a relationship.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that makes sense, and it kind of explains the whole kind of um evolution of homosexual dating as well. It's the
Yeah.
same thing.
Also, I think there is this dynamic as well where women, obviously, since kind of women's rights and everything is proliferated and everything else, they're a lot more independent and economically well off. And I think that's changed the dynamic between men and women as well. And maybe that could be
Mm,
intimidating for men.
yeah.
And it could make women even more selective, because they're doing quite well. I mean, on average, they're being educated more in the West, thus, you know, going to move up more socioeconomically, and that puts a lot of pressure on men in a certain respect, to where maybe it's harder to find a relationship, that women might actually date around a bit more and things like that, because they're in a different position than they were previously. So I think that all kind of attributes, there's a lot of factors
Mm,
that
mm.
are playing into the new dynamics that we're seeing today. And I think less people are getting married and getting married later as well, but as a result.
So this kind of ties into one of my questions, but what makes a woman seem formidable to you?
Confidence, attraction, and uh, not acting interested.
Mm, nonchalance, right?
Exactly. So if I'm not getting cues from her that show that she's attracted to me, that's fairly intimidating. But at the same time, that's quite stimulating as well. Depending on the guy, I'm not sure. But for me, I'll be even more attracted to that person. It's kind of like that classic situation where you want what you can't have. But for intimidation, that's for sure. If they're really good looking, if they're not giving you any cues that they're interested at all, and that will be quite intimidating. Or, and of course, if they're very sure of themselves, you know what I mean? Because it's already quite intimidating to go talk to a girl anyways. If they're really sure of themselves, and that adds another layer to it, because yeah, it feels like you're kind of not so sure and they are, and that puts you in this kind of vulnerable situation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But physical attraction for sure plays a part. You know, if they're really beautiful, then that's intimidating.
Yeah. So have you learned anything
What do you mean?
in this conversation about homosexual? Have I answered your questions?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think we hit on a lot of good topics, and obviously I've known you for a long time, so we've
Mm,
personally talked about the differences between the homosexual world and the heterosexual world, but there are definitely some dynamics that I wasn't aware of before
li-
having this conversation.
like
And
what?
I think the uh kind of the mannerisms within the relationship. So I kind of vaguely knew that men and women, or sorry, in a homosexual relationship, two men do follow a masculine and feminine role. Um, but how similar it is to the heterosexual dating dynamic and relationship was quite surprising to me
So
in terms of.
I say that with a kind of disclaimer.
Mhm,
Um, I think that that definitely applies to my relationship and the way that I
mhm,
interact with people, but it
mhm,
definitely can't be generalized. There are a lot of homosexual relationships that I've seen where I'm like, I like, there's always that question that lingers in the air. Oh, like who's top, who's bottom, right?
mhm.
And it's not always that obvious. And
Yeah,
even when you see them interact with one another, you're not
yeah,
always that sure about whether someone embodies a feminine, or sometimes it can be a surprise. So yeah,
yeah.
I wouldn't say that it's absolute. This is just my experience.
Of course, yeah. And I think the same thing happens with men or women. You can tell if there's like maybe more of a beta man and
Yeah,
a
like
stronger woman,
yourself.
but sometimes it gets yeah, exactly, yeah. But sometimes it gets to a point where you don't really know. It seems quite equal. I mean, I
Yeah,
think that
yeah,
happens in all
yeah,
relationships, you know what I mean?
yeah,
um but just the fact that that is played out so obviously in a homosexual relationship, I don't think it's that obvious from those on the outside looking in. But the way you've just explained it, the same dynamics exist in a heterosexual relationship,
yeah. It's kind of like a
in a
dance, right?
homosexual relationship. Yeah,
Indeed. The idea is that you balance each other out, right?
yeah,
Otherwise, I think
exactly.
it'll just end up being incompatible.
Yeah, definitely. So I think, do you have any other questions?
I'm done. I think you've covered all of the questions that I actually had for you. There weren't that
Yeah,
many questions that I had. I think these are things that I've been thinking about for a long time, trying to
yeah.
compare homosexual relationships to heterosexual. And yeah, what I've kind of noticed is that a lot of things do carry over. But the
Hmm.
main difference is just how much time that heterosexuals have had. And I think that makes a huge difference as to what men and women can expect from the opposite sex when they're dating.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
that, I think that makes it easier, and I do believe, and I'd like to kind of dedicate another episode to this, where we
Hmm.
talk more about how um, the gay community can learn from the values and precepts that the heterosexual society has been using. I think that by and large it will benefit the bottoms or the receivers more, because I think that the way that the gay world is right now
Hmm.
benefits tops
Hmm.
to a ridiculous degree,
Hmm.
because of how much anonymity that and discreetness that tops can actually use, um,
Hmm.
because that's what we want. Tops are just like men. We want to have transitory sexual experiences with no strings
Hmm.
attached, and
Hmm.
invariably that benefits the giver rather than the receiver. So if
Hmm.
those values could be applied to the homosexual world, and where bottoms are empowered to the
Yeah.
same level or the same degree as women in society, then I do
Hmm.
believe that it will create more of a balance.
Yeah, definitely. I think for sure we'll definitely be diving into that. And I think a lot of other issues around this as well. One of which being homophobia. I think that could be quite interesting. But yeah, I completely agree. I think with the homophobia, I think this was a good introduction between the differences between the homosexual and straight world, especially for people who aren't familiar with one or the other. And this is a good jumping off point to some of the other topics we want to get into around sexuality. So, thank you for listening to our conversation today between the differences between gay and straight dating. We are definitely going to be talking about a lot more controversial topics moving forward. We're now on all major platforms: Apple, Spotify, YouTube. If you want to watch this podcast rather than listen to it, feel free to subscribe, give us any feedback that you have. All of that's much appreciated. And until next time, this is Tim.
Yeah, until next time, guys, it's Lucas.
All right, see you guys later.